Gary Collins here for Central Coast Newspapers, and joining me today we have the CEO of Central Coast Council, Gary Murphy. Gary's made time in his busy schedule to come and give us a bit of an overview on how things are progressing at Council. Welcome, Gary, and thanks for giving us the time today.
My pleasure, Terry, yeah.
Now, we were discussing whether we could still call you the new CEO, and that's a moot point. You've been in the position now for some months. The first CEO appointed following the amalgamation of Wyong and Gosford councils. How have you found the settling in process?
It's been busy but challenging. I've really enjoyed it. I've been well received by the council and the community, I think. Where I go to, people have been very receptive and very welcoming. So far so good.
So you've been out in the community a little bit. Last time we spoke, you were mentioning that you were meeting with several of the business chambers of commerce.
Yes.
You've been going to their meetings, and because I know one of your briefs is to try and work with business to increase opportunities in the region.
Correct. And even just last night we had the Small Business Forum in Wyong and Gosford, and we had some really good speakers there. Robin Hobbs, the Small Business Commissioner, was there, and we have signed up to the Easy to Do Business program. And we also a small business friendly council. So we're not quite there yet, I'll just put it out there, but we are trying to work a lot harder with business, particularly small business, because they're the backbone of our economy.
Now, I know you came into a difficult position because it followed a period of following the amalgamation when we were in the hands of an administrator. So we had no CEO, we had no councillor for that period of time, and you've come in and taken over the reins. And you were mentioning that there was still some things to be settled following the amalgamation. How is that process going now? Are things fairly smooth sailing?
No, I wouldn't say they're smooth sailing, but things, I think, at least we've got a direction. So that the ship is still hitting a few waves now and then, but I think we do have a direction. So, look, a lot of the legacy issues like the Mangrove Mountain landfill matter, that's going through the courts at the moment, and there's also a subsequent DA that's been lodged. So that will play its course and go through. In terms of a lot of the development activity, I think the latest report that went to Council shows that we are well on track to meeting our housing targets as set down by the Department of Planning. And I think, off memory, I think it's about 862 DAs in the last quarter that we've actually approved. So people will always take issue with Council around development applications because you've got a proponent who wants to do something and usually somebody who doesn't want that to happen, and it's a balancing act to try and get that right. We don't always get it right, but I think what we are doing now is we are, with the consolidated LEP that is going out at the moment, trying to provide some certainty for both the development community and the community at large about the planning controls and what the rules are, because clearly before the amalgamation there were differing rules in the north and the south, and now we're trying to get them better aligned as the precursor to the comprehensive local environment plan, which will follow this, but that'll take some time because we want to do more studies to get that right.
Okay, it's good that you say there have been so many DAs approved in that last quarter, because I know during that period under the administrator there was concern that the DAs were taking a long while to go through. And I know the Mayor's just recently said that you're on target to meet those housing quotas, the predicted housing quotas required by the year 2039. And so you have a plan of how many approvals need to be made each year to get to that point. Is that sort of the way it works?
Yeah, I think it's, again, roughly around about 2,100 approvals. Now, obviously that's market determinant, so we can't manufacture DAs to come through, but certainly what we're seeing is that the market is responding well to that. And I think particularly in the Gosford area, if you have a look at the number of cranes that are in the Gosford area and the apartments certainly that are going up, they're certainly working well towards that. So far so good. Okay.
How long roughly does it take? What's the average for time from the lodgement of a development application before the staff has done its work and it's ready to go out on public exhibition?
Well, it depends. It depends on the nature of the development. It depends on whether it's complying or not, how much work needs to be done. But certainly the Department of Planning puts out guidelines and benchmarks, and we're well within those. Again, I'm not sure of the exact number, but I think certainly around about the 40 days is one of the benchmarks, and we certainly meet that. Now, of course, there will be people who will be watching this going, oh, well, my DA took 4 years to get through. And of course, there are always exceptions, and there will be differing reasons why certain DAs get stalled, either through a lack of information or waiting on third-party advice, whether it's Office of Environment Heritage and studies that need to be done. But the one thing that we do say is early engagement with our staff is absolutely essential. Too often people will buy a piece of land, they'll want to do their dream development and then find out that it's got the incorrect zoning or it's not permissible under the plan or whatever it is, and then they become quite frustrated. So we really encourage people, mum and dad developers or even large developers, to come to us and talk to us about what their proposals are, so we can guide them, we can inform them about the best course of action, so we don't have tears later on.
Right. So the bulk of those DA approvals that have gone through in the last quarter, they would be mainly residential type development. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, mainly residential. There has been some commercial development and also agricultural related development. So up on the mountain, for example, there was the composting processing facility that was approved. There's been some chicken farms as well up Kulnura way, but the bulk of them will be in the residential market. Okay. A lot of the larger developments, Terry, obviously would be state significant, go through that process.
That's what I was just going to raise, because I think there may be some confusion among the general readership about just exactly what an SSD is. So my understanding is that if a developer feels that their application falls under the guidelines, they can apply for state government approval as a state significant development. That's the case, isn't it? In which case they become the consent authority and council virtually steps out of that consent process. Yeah,
you're right. I think there is some confusion, particularly with the Gosford SEP, and now we have the Darkinjung SEP, which is out at the moment. There's the state planning approval process, so people can get confused about who the consent authority is, and particularly for significant developments like, say, the Wallara 2, which has also been quite controversial. That was determined by the state government, so it wasn't determined by either of the former councils. So the planning process is quite complicated. So unless you're in the game and you're an experienced developer, for the average person in the street, or particularly those who feel that they're affected by a proposal, often don't know where to turn. And again, that's where our staff can be very helpful in helping them navigate their way through the system.
Yeah, know just who the consent authority is.
Yeah.
Now, on those projects where the state government is the consent authority, they still liaise with council. Am I right in thinking that?
Correct. So, for example, if you have something that goes to the Joint Regional Planning Panel, our staff still have to prepare the assessment of effects to go up there. But also, we would expect that where there are significant developments, that the state agency would liaise with council, because clearly there's usually an impact on our water system, our road system, parking, for example, all of those issues that we need to address.
Would that also be true for some of the state significant developments? Would the government be looking for council's input on some of those as well?
Yeah, it depends on the development, obviously, but where those impacts would happen, then yes, they would. Yeah.
Because oftentimes the SSDs are in conjunction with other projects nearby for which council is the consent authority, so there's got to be some sort of consensus, I would think.
You need to look at the big picture and how it all integrates, that's right. Yeah.
So Gary, looking at the various proposals that are underway in the region, including the ones for which council's the consent authority and including the SSDs, what do you see where do you see the region being in 5 years? How do you see our development going in the next 5 years?
Yeah, I think, look, there are a lot of studies going on at the moment. We've got the Gosford to Erina corridor study. That's a mouthful, isn't it?
It is.
Gosford to Erina corridor study. And then, we're doing master plans, the Lake Munmora master plans out at the moment. We're going to be doing the Woi Woi one and the Wyong as well. So we're starting to get the planning framework right, and in terms of, as I mentioned, the consolidated LEP process as well. So I think in 5 years' time, what we're going to see is clearly a lot more development than what we've got now. But I think what we'll also see is a lot more tension between development and community, and I guess the tension between environmental impacts. So, you know, in Gosford, for example, there's always been, I guess, a challenge because of the geography of height restrictions, and some people wanting to maximise the floor space ratio on their development, which is understandable, but then concerns about overshadowing, concerns about sight lines and other environmental impacts. So I think, you know, in order to achieve the targets that have been set by the state government, and one of the things that we are doing is actually validating some of those assumptions to ensure that while the state government has set some targets, that they are appropriate for the Central Coast. Because if we look at the available land and we look at what the targets are, and if it means that all of the development has to take place in medium to high density, that may not be what some areas of the coast actually want. So do we have to temper those targets for our community expectations? So that's some of the work that we're going to be doing over the next 5 years. But I think we are going to see an intensity of development. I think despite the you know, the current economic situation, I think there is consumer confidence in the Central Coast, and that's on the back of, you know, the significant state and public sector developments around particularly health, with the hospitals in both Gosford and Wyong. The university development, which is happening on the back of that all breeds investor confidence, and as I said, the crane's in the sky with some of those residential developments. So I think it's going to be an exciting period over the next 5 years. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think it is too, and I think it's I think people, after years of being told that there's going to be big changes in Gosford and being disappointed, I think people are finally, as you say, seeing the cranes in the sky and realising, well, things are really happening. Yeah. So I think, as you say, we're on the verge of development flux around this particular area, and to the north as well, as you say, with the Wyong Hospital expansion and so forth. Well, it sounds like we're in for exciting times, and you and your wife have settled down now into becoming coasties.
Well, I don't know if we'll ever be coasties, because it's a bit like I remember being in a previous place, and I'll tell you a funny story. There was a funeral, and this gentleman was 101 years old, and the person was delivering the eulogy, and they said, and of course Bill came out from the UK, you know, in 19 whatever it is, and he was only 18 months old, and the two ladies looked at each other. All this time I thought he was a coastie. So he'd been there for 100 years, but still wasn't considered a coastie. So I don't know what the time period is, but we are settling in, Terry, thank you. And we, as I said, we find the community very hospitable. We're getting involved in the community, and looking forward to the future together on the Central Coast.
Well, thank you, Gary, for sharing your vision for the future of the area, and it's full steam ahead now.
Yes,
you know, the amalgamation's behind us now.
Yep.
We've got a council in full gear, and hopefully we've got lots to look forward to. So, Gary Murphy, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Terry. Thank you. My pleasure.